So thank you very much. The aim of the presentation is to give you an overview of crew monitoring systems for fighter aircrafts. So this is not a research paper. It's an industrial point of view about why crew monitoring could be of use for fighter aircrafts. What are the challenges that we foresee, and explain a bit on the state of the art currently. Okay. So I'll talk about the context a bit, then how the pilot role is going to evolve in the coming years, then objectives, principles of crew monitoring for military fighters, then what are the conditions of the crew states that are of interest, and talk about countermeasures, then challenges, state of the art. So the thing is, in fighter aircraft, you have specific fighter missions, and as you know, fighter missions mean high constraints. So you have physiological constraints, such as sustained accelerations. You have high altitude flight. It's under oxygen. You have very long duration flights that in low comfort environment. You have little time to, or no possibility to rest. Then you also have cognitive constraints. You have to manage a very complex mission. You have complex systems to manage. You have lots of different actors to interact with. So we call it very often infobesity, obesity of information. You have very big variations in workload. And actually the human body, the human mind reacts sometimes badly to those stressors, if we can say. And you have lots of degraded states that can happen. So I'll give you a few examples, if I can find them. All right. Some maybe you know, some maybe you don't. This is the first one. It's a Mirage landing, Mirage C, I think, landing in Cambrai in the 90s. It's in French, I will translate. He's talking with the tower. It's just his HUD. The tower says, and what's going on? He says, "Damn, I forgot to put the gear down." So you actually have quite the same in another famous video. Here it's in a civilian authorized plane. Maybe I'll put forward a bit, no, just here. Oh. So they are approaching. I think it's in France in the Alps, and this alarm is to say that the gear is still up. So you can hear it actually. And the pilots actually, they're a bit focused on the fact that there is another aircraft in the traffic. And yeah, let's see what happens. So it beeps. And they are talking together. And someone is filming as well. And yeah, you guessed, I guess. Yeah, it gets bad. And he just said, "You forgot to put the gear down." And last one, which is about accelerations, just for fun. So it's in a centrifuge, and he's just going to experiment 9G.
3, 2, 1, engage. Today, take deep breath. Your top, breathe. 1, 2, breathe. Drop the shoulder, breathe. 1, 2, breathe. Squeeze the legs, squeeze the butt. Hey, breathe, keep breathing.
So this is to illustrate the fact that actually physiological and so again, Control L. Yeah, thanks. The fact that physiological and cognitive constraints may lead to actually accidents. So human factors, of course, we take human factors in account when designing a cockpit. We try to avoid such situations, but actually they still happen, and human factors, as you know, is one of the main causes of accidents, especially for military factors. So if we could detect in flight such degraded conditions with what we call a crew monitoring system, it could actually increase flight safety. It's not only about flight safety, it's also about performance, because some of these states, such as the mental overload, can decrease performance. And this is going to be even more the case because the mission of fighter pilots is going to evolve in the coming years. What we called, so it was well introduced by a previous speaker, the collaborative combat, connected collaborative combat, even for multi-domain operations, is going to transform the role of the pilot. So by collaborative combat, we can mention digitalization of the battlefield, things that were previously in the mentally performed by the pilots are now going to be digitalized, and there are going to be digital exchanges between the platforms, manned and unmanned teaming, of course. So controlling unmanned platforms from your cockpit while you still have to fly your own aircraft. Extension from air domain to multi-domain, which means actually much more complex tasks to perform, and the battle rhythm that is accelerating. So all this means more demanding tasks, demanding cognitive tasks for the pilots. And the thing is, pilot mental resources are going to be the same tomorrow. So if you still want to fly securely, to realize your mission, to execute the mission, to be able to reconfigure, and if you have a much more complex mission to do, then you have to automate. And the machine has to collaborate correctly with the pilot, with the crew. So there must be a true collaboration between the crew and the machine. We often call it human-machine teaming. And monitoring the crew state could be a good part of having a shared mutual knowledge between the machine and the human. Because so in today's systems, the crew knows the machine through the information that are presented, but the machine doesn't know the pilot. So if we want a true collaboration, the machine should have an insight on the pilot state. Then what are the objectives of crew monitoring for military fighters? So flight safety, we already said. So detect incapacitations and trigger countermeasures. Cognitive states that could also cause a crash, such as the one we saw, non-perceiving an alarm, or not following a procedure, for example, like gear down. Then enhance performance, because some of the states degrade the performance. So we mentioned mental overload, but let's say attentional tunneling, etc. And also increase performance, so such as detecting situation awareness of the pilot is not necessarily degraded, but knowing the situation awareness of the pilot could make the performance of the team better. And then a last objective is also offline analysis. So for the first two objectives, it's more real-time detection. For the third one, measuring elements and being able to use them after the flight or for the design of future system could also be of interest. It could, for example, be used as proof for certification of future designs. So then the principle of crew monitoring, you probably already know, is that some of these degraded states can be detected through physiological indicators. So you have sensors that are worn by the crew, ECG, eye trackers, accelerometers, breathing measures, EEGs, and then you have sensors that would be not worn by the pilot. Again, eye trackers, cameras, motion detectors. So sensors is the first source of data. Then you have the interactions between the crew and the machine, pilot commands, the voice, the words said by the crew, the elements that the crew has looked at, and of course you have the context. For instance, to detect hypoxia, it's very useful to know the altitude because there shouldn't be hypoxia at low altitude, but also let's say the tasks that the pilot is supposed to do or the phase of the flight. If you are in a transit and the pilot is overloaded, it's weird. And then the aim is to mix all this, shake it up, and detect in real time the conditions and understand if something is wrong. Okay, I'll give here a few examples of the conditions or the crew states that that would be of interest. The categories here are maybe a bit simplistic because the boundaries between them are quite fuzzy. But yeah, G-lock, which is loss of consciousness, as we saw, hypoxia, drowsiness, all the sensory illusions, visual or vestibular, that can lead to spatial disorientation, stress, be it physiological or cognitive, mental overload, mind wandering, degraded situation awareness, emotions. I mean, military mission can be very emotionally impactful. And then what I call here behavioral conditions, for instance, understanding the task of the crew, and then typical cases, attentional tunneling, perseveration, and bad collaboration or bad trust with the system. Then there's a notion of what we call crew functional state. It's combination of the states and the context parameters to be able to identify if the crew is functional or not. So if it's able to realize its mission. And that crew functional state would then be the trigger for reconfigurations. What we often call countermeasures, so to try to get back to a functional state. What could be those countermeasures? Some are quite simple. If you detect a hypoxia in flight, well, then you could ask to ask the pilot to fly at a low level, or automatically activate emergency descent. Basically, you could then just inform the pilot, alert him, automatically trigger a reaction or propose it to the pilot. The thing is, you shouldn't make the situation worse, and that's why it's complicated to make some general statements about that, because it pretty much depends on every state that you would want to react to. And countermeasures are not everything. It would be already good to be able to detect after the flight in debriefing some degraded situations. So debriefing is something very important for military pilots. So if they could, after the flight, look at errors, identify some degraded cognitive situations, it will already be very interesting for them. Some challenges then. So I categorize them in three. So first, sensors. So we said we need to put worn on or non-worn sensors to observe the pilot. Choosing the appropriate physical sensors, biosensors, is quite complicated because we have the constraint of integrating those in the cockpit. And the pilot in its cockpit is already very constrained. It has lots of equipment, has a headset, has a G suit, it has a combination, and so on. So there's not a lot of place to put sensors on, and they can be disturbing for the pilot. Then the sensors can be more or less appropriate to detect the physical parameters that we want to choose. And of course, we need to, depending on the states and the conditions that we want to detect, there could be lots of different combinations of physical indicators. And what's really complex behind that is that some physiological parameters react to various various conditions, and of course it could be difficult to separate correctly the variables. Okay, then for detection algorithms, actually the main techniques that are used to build those algorithms is machine learning, and you have the typical machine learning challenges: intra-individual, inter-individual variability. Specifically for military topics such as these ones, it's the volume of data and the classification. Classified data cannot be used or very difficultly, so it's a major issue. All right, and maybe finally the legal and ethical aspects of the of crew monitoring systems to develop the algorithms. Also, question of acceptance and proportionate use versus the utility of those algorithms. So really my last message would be state of the art. It's quite difficult today to reach, to get in the aircraft. So what exists today are a few sensors. This is not supposed to be exhaustive, but you have some sensors that monitor breathing parameters. Instead of something that's called IPBAM. You have some, for example, this hexoskin t-shirt or some oximeters. So a few sensors are now at TRL 9 and can fly in the aircraft. If we talk about algorithms or integrated system, they do not exist currently. The civilian commercial aeronautics is quite ahead because the detection of the drowsiness in civilian aircraft is a major issue. But it's not, there's no TRL 9 system so far. And as you may probably know, lots of lab experiments are ongoing. Loads of papers published on the topic. But really, as an airframer, the difficulty is to get to higher TRL. And yeah, I could mention also enhanced space training, which is not in real time on flights, but on ground, where such techniques are commonly used. And as a conclusion, so we saw that crew monitoring system could really save lives in for military flights, but that collaborative combat is also going to increase the need for human-machine collaboration, and crew monitoring systems could be of big use for that. We have lots of complex technical and legal or ethical challenges, and it's those concerns military and civilian aviation, but still at low TRL or prototyping level so far. And thank you for your attention.